Well, welcome to the Bethel Library, where you are. And this is a part of the Prime Time series of Bethel Library. The Prime Time is really a great resource that we have at school. It celebrates learning beyond the classroom through the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. It's a collaborative project between the Friends of the Bethel Library, faculty development, and departments such as ours and many other offices on campus. If you'd like to see what's coming up on Prime Time, you can check out the homepage of the library's new website, which is easy to find, I would imagine, where the upcoming events are listed. And if you missed one, most are recorded and can be viewed online in the digital library. Is this being recorded? All right. So Lauren will stick around forever. This is really great. Graduation this December. Let's see. If you're a student or faculty, if you're a student, if you've been assigned a research project that required library research, you should think about submitting it for the Friends of the Library annual library research prize. There's a $250 award, which is really handy. And also, it's a real significant contribution to the life of Bethel College. The deadline is February 15th, and the information cards are available on the refreshment table back there and posters around campus. This coming December 12th, David Williams, a former professor of Bethel, really great guy, he's now at Susan Pacific University. He's going to be with us to share this chapter in the upcoming book, Holy Persons, edited by Chris Geertz. This presentation, The Pietist Impulse and the Integration of Faith and Reason in the Contemporary Evangelical University, will argue that the historian W.R. Ward's influential rewriting of history of evangelicalism casts the Pietist impulse in a new light and can help reframe the values held by evangelical universities on the relationship between faith and scholarship. David's a very engaging speaker, and we really should miss it if you get a chance to become a judge. We have another equally engaging, or maybe even more engaging speaker this morning, Lauren Olson. Lauren's graduating in December, and well deserved. She was the second prize winner of the Sociologists of Minnesota Maryland Road annual student paper competition, and she's going to present on that paper this morning. This competition is actually quite intense and invites people from across the state to participate. So it's a real honor for Bethel and for Lauren to have won, and we're very, very proud of her. So she'll present on her paper, Family Structures of Homeless Men. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So yeah, my purpose today is just kind of explain my paper to you. During the fall of 2012, I was a social work intern at a men's homeless shelter in Minneapolis. And while I was there, I learned a lot about the reality of homelessness in the Twin Cities. I witnessed the communication and relationships between homeless individuals and their families, and immediately I was curious about their family structures, which encouraged my future research on this population from Minneapolis. The original purpose of my research was to see how their childhood family structures affected the families that they created for themselves. So initially, I was curious about how the homeless men would define family and home, especially while being in a state of homelessness. I was curious if their childhood experiences affected the relationships they created as adults. How did homelessness affect those relationships, if at all? So as I met with men, the first question I always asked was for the men to describe family in their own words, just to set a foundation for the rest of our interview. And then of course we proceeded with questions about just like basic descriptions of their childhood and created families, and without fail, the men immediately shared stories with me about their childhoods, the best moments growing up, challenging times. We just discussed what they wanted their future family relationships to look like. So I felt really privileged that I had the opportunity to get to know these men. So starting off with my literature review, I discovered the Minnesota and Wilder research funds, both projects focusing on researching homelessness in Minnesota. I found the statistics on Minnesota's homeless community so intriguing, as well as helpful in providing quick and powerful facts to the overall homeless situation in Minneapolis. Wilder research actually came to St. Stephen's, and I helped them complete their own research on the homeless population in Minneapolis. Overall, their research generated a clear idea of the overwhelming need for change, especially for those in poverty. So here's a quick few facts up here that you can read. For example, 1 in 4 homeless adults were homeless when they were children. Over 75% are single, only 4% are married. 72 felt loved and cared for as a child. So there's just a few of those. Okay. As I dug deeper into the professional literature on homelessness, it was clear that people who studied homelessness concluded that unstable and negative childhood family environments are a huge contributor to adult homelessness. In a comparison of homeless white men, there's a combination of statistics showing these contributions. 10% of white men believe that a personal divorce was the reason. Growing up, 17% of homeless men were shuffled between foster homes or juvenile delinquent centers. 1 in 4 were abused as children, and over half claimed to have alcohol or drug-related problems within their families as children. Okay. Even through all the professional research I read, I concluded that poor family situations were a contributor to homelessness, but they didn't really dig deep into how that affects an individual's relationship with their family today. Quite a few researchers focus solely on single mothers who are homeless and the challenges they face, which creates a gap in the research of men. As my research progressed, I realized that I wanted to look at the importance of social systems in the community homeless men create, kind of in the absence of maybe some of those family structures. Okay, so I conducted my research quantitatively. It was for my senior STEM class here at Bethel, and I obtained my data through interviews and participant observation. The majority of my time was spent in participation observation and informal conversations, especially because family can be a really emotional topic for people to discuss. In order to maintain confidentiality throughout my research and my paper and my presentation today, I will not use their real names or photos. There are 2 sites that I went to in Minneapolis, St. Stephen's Men's Shelter and Elam Church. St. Stephen's Shelter is a part of a larger agency dedicated to ending homelessness in the Twin Cities through programming that includes housing opportunities, advocacy, employment support, emergency services, and outreach. Previously, I spent time there as an intern learning how to be a social worker, and now I had this new role of being a volunteer and a researcher, so that was kind of an interesting thing at first to figure out my role and what tasks I did have and didn't have. But the great thing about going back to St. Stephen's as a researcher is a lot of the men there already knew who I was. My purpose as a student, I had created some really great relationships, so that was just an easy transition. Okay. So this is actually a picture of St. Stephen's. This is one of the rooms where all the beds are. So just so you can get kind of an idea of that. So every afternoon around 4:30, men are allowed to enter the shelter, whether they have a bed or not, so they can take advantage of any of the shelter resources, like taking a shower, getting their mail, getting clothes, eating snacks, and meeting with an advocate or a nurse, or even just hanging out. At 6:30, after all the beds are given away, dinner is served, and those without a bed have to leave. So as a volunteer, I was in charge of handing out mail to the guests as they came in, which was a really neat opportunity for me just to talk with them, and as I received mail from maybe a mom or a family member, just kind of talking about reactions that they got for that. But the primary hangout spot at St. Stephen's is the den, where the TV and the couches and tables are. The guys spend the majority of their time in the den, so it became a prime spot for participant observation. Where we just got to talk about life and share meals together. So that was something that I really enjoyed in my research. So we did a lot of things together in the den. We played chess, we watched TV. I just kind of did whatever they were doing just for the opportunity to initiate some conversations. So weekly I spent time down in the shelter just hanging out with the men and listening to their stories. Numerous times without even any prompting from me, men would come up to me and just start telling me about their lives. And they were just really excited to have someone to listen to them. So through my time at St. Stephen's, I got 2 informats who I will call DM and JS. And this obviously isn't them. This is just a photo of the St. Stephen's Outreach team. Okay. So DM was my first informant. He allowed me to share his story because he really believes in the importance of storytelling to empower positive change. He repeatedly told me that he believes his unstable family structure growing up deeply influenced his future choices. And he kind of was the inspiration behind my research. He was the reason why I wanted to explore deeper into the family structures of homeless men. And our interviews were never strict or super formal. They were really laid back and just kind of us going back and forth sharing our own experiences. And every time I came back, he was running up to me trying to tell me something new that had happened in his family, so that was fun. So then my other informant was JS, and unlike JS, he was a little bit more hesitant to share some of his story, but he was willing to share it, which was really neat. He took the time to sit down and just answer all my questions and talk through exactly what I wanted to research. His parents divorced when he was young, around 7 years old, and he was raised by his mother. And he stated that growing up without a father figure was hard, especially in the 70s, which created a lot of issues that he believes carried into his life presently. His relationship now with his mother and his sister is strained, and you can see how the effects of not having a father really influence those relationships. He wishes that he could kind of start life over with having a good father figure to be a supportive role model during his childhood and help him correct those mistakes. He's hoping someday to be married with children and involved in a compassionate church. He is actively creating relationships that he is satisfied with. DM also wished for a more stable childhood, similar to most of the men I talked to. I started getting involved with Elam Church about halfway through my research. I got a chance to meet with Pastor Becky on multiple occasions. She leads a ministry at Elam Church called Hope Avenue with her congregation that provides food, showers, clothes, counseling, and Bible studies for any homeless men in need, or woman. And on Sunday mornings, Elam provides breakfast and an opportunity to join for the church service. And then during the week, Pastor Becky meets with these individuals if they wish and just kind of advocates for them and counsels them. Her main focus, despite obvious homeless needs, is to create relationships and focus on the mental and spiritual health that oftentimes kind of gets dismissed. Part of her vision is to counsel individuals to reconcile with their past, especially if that includes family. So she goes out of her way to offer the church phone and drive them to meet with their family. So Becky was a really great resource because she, just coming from a religious background and just being a Bethel student, that was helpful in that sense. And then she also just provided a lot of stories that backed up kind of my questions and other experiences that I had. Let's see. Elam and St. Stephen's are far enough away from each other in the Minneapolis area that the same crowd of men don't usually attend both. So that was a neat chance for me to kind of get to know a new group of individuals. Unfortunately, due to my short amount of time at Hope Avenue, the majority of my time was spent participant observation. I felt like I didn't get to know the men on kind of that level where I felt comfortable asking them about their families, especially because that is just an emotional thing. I felt like I didn't make those connections and didn't have enough time. But I did get to initiate informal conversations with many of the men, and we just got to talk about where their families were and just kind of those few brief things. But definitely at Elam and St. Stephen's, I saw the full spectrum of families through the conversations we had. Some had great families growing up, loving, full families, all the way to abandoned, broken families, and I saw everything in between. So obviously each individual and their experiences are different and affected them in vastly different ways. No matter positive or negative, men love talking about their childhood and their stories that they had. Throughout all the conversations I had with my informants and fellow men, I got to spend time with. Social support systems were always brought up, whether that was their friends or their church or the community of men that they had at the shelter. Although DM's family lives far away, he has a close group of friends that he hangs out with at the shelter. They always have each other's back, whether it's for a ride or lending money, or they even created a Bible study with like an interfaith dialogue setting, so that was really neat. And JS has a lot of friends that come and go, and he definitely wishes for a more spiritual support system. Initially in my research, I defined family in a strict sense, such as the biological family with parents and siblings, or a created family, such as wife and children. Over the process of my research, my definition of family almost had to change from the strict biological sense to a support system. JS defined family as stating, family is not only parents, siblings, and offspring, and pets, but best friends too. So therefore, I began to not only ask questions about family, but support systems of individuals as well. So, the men at St. Stephen's, when they get a bed there, they can get it for 28 plus days, depending on kind of how they follow the rules. So the shelter can kind of become a long-term place for men to stay, especially for those in jobs. They can kind of create this like little bank thing where they bring their paycheck to the shelter, and just to prove that they're like making their goal of trying to get themselves out of being homelessness. So that long-term place kind of becomes definitely a community. For these men, they create a lot of relationships and just have the opportunity to network with each other, whether that's for getting jobs or meeting with an agency. And so another thing I kind of touched on briefly with the men was talking about how their sense of home has changed since being homeless. JS believes that home is where you're the happiest at, an environment that you can make your own and provide to your family. Even though they didn't have a house of their home, the shelter was still a place to sleep and eat. It wasn't home because it wasn't their own place or a place where they felt happy. In fact, in most situations they felt embarrassed, but I think they definitely were grateful for the community that they built within the shelter. At Elam, one man shared with me that his family doesn't live here, and he wishes he has the money or the chance to go see them again, but it's unlikely to happen. That's common for most of the men I met in the shelter and at Elam, that they were immigrants or just from across the country, and so that can be kind of put a strain on the relationship, not having enough money to make a phone call home or even go visit them. And then oftentimes there's also the motivation to just not resolve those relationships. Let's see. Looking at my informant stories, I see similarities. JS wishes to be reunited with his daughter, but due to the circumstances, he isn't able to live with her. And DM is hoping to make enough money over the next few months to travel across the U.S. to see his extended family. Overall, I saw the importance of how positive social systems with the life of someone dealing with being in the state of homelessness with either their friends or family is really, really important to them. Often, when people aren't able to find the appropriate positive support, the cycle becomes nearly impossible to get out. Several men I spent time with have great social support systems who are willing to help them and just encourage them to get out of that cycle of homelessness, while others are completely on their own, forcing them to create their own communities and just seek the help of church staff or the shelter. Often in my conversations, I would ask men what they want their future relationships to look like, and every single person immediately said they hope to create positive support systems, no matter how that looks. Shelter and church advocates not only strive to help men find permanent housing and jobs, but create strong relationships. Frequently in my research, I reviewed a major cause of homelessness was the lack of family structure and support. This further argues the point of the importance of positive social structures within an individual's life, especially during a period of homelessness. More often than not, men lack the motivation to make connections with their family members. I strongly hope my research will help in the fight of prevention and ending homelessness. I discovered the significance of stable family structures and support systems during childhood and current situations. They all seem to have a direct correlation with the way people deal with being homelessness, or even how to prevent and ending up being homeless for a period of time. There's an obvious need for a positive, stable family environment growing up, and I can see that even in my own life. Most definitely, there is a need to create good role models for how individuals should act and how to create their own families. My research can benefit a variety of resources at St. Stephen's and Elam, and they both already recognize and seek to create positive relationships with the homeless men they come in contact with. So yeah, that was kind of the extent of my research. And then this past fall, I submitted my research to a competition, and I got second place, like Carly said. And then I also went back to St. Stephen's and just volunteered a couple of times and kind of got to see some of those men again, so that was just really neat for me. So that's all I have. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything special to share. Oh, yes.
What about this support structure among the men themselves? I'm sorry, maybe you already said this.
Yeah. Yeah, I just like within the shelter.
Yeah, with the
Yeah,
themselves?
they definitely have created a community for themselves, whether that's getting jobs or networking to find other agencies. There's definitely a strong community within the shelter. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, they're friendly
Oh, yeah.
and
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
I have another question. I don't see a lot of hands. What would be the next steps for the research?
I mean, for like my research personally, I shared it both with Elam and St. Stephen's. So that was just fun to kind of hear their feedback. And these are things that they are definitely doing already, is like really seeking to create those positive relationships, which is really great. So I think most shelters, hopefully across the nation, are doing the same thing. I don't really know. Personally.
Back on your stats slide,
Yeah.
there was the stat that 1/4 of people grew up homeless in childhood, and then also that like around 72% felt loved as a child. And I was just wondering, and I don't know if this is something that you even could know, but is there any correlation between that 25% that grew up homeless? Is that possibly like similar 25% that didn't feel loved as a child?
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure that's probably.
Yeah.
Good question. Did you get any sense at all of how the homeless men that you worked with saw you or saw volunteers? What did they think about volunteers?
Yeah.
Like from Bethel and other areas that come in and work in these areas?
Yeah, yeah. I think for the most part there was like an open line of communication between us and the guests. I mean, there was definitely some guests who didn't want to talk to me and just kind of wanted to do their own thing, and that was totally fine. It was definitely helpful being a social work internship at first, or being a social work intern, because they all knew, oh, this is Lauren from Bethel. She's here to be an intern, and I like did social work things with them, filling out different forms. So I think that was a good foundation. And then coming back as a researcher and a volunteer, my role was different, and I think that was quite obvious. And they all knew who I was and knew that I was a student. And oftentimes, like I would even bring my homework with me and just sit down at a table and do homework, and someone joined me and asked me what I was doing. So I think, yeah, I feel like for the most part it was another face to talk to and hang out with. So
I don't think you focused on this, but does it seem like the longer they are homeless, the harder it is to get back out into the world and kind of to get into just kind of a routine and cycle?
yeah, some of them definitely do that. The nice thing about St. Stephen's, it does seem kind of interesting that it's like a longer term stay. But when men first come to the shelter, they make a list of goals that they want to complete. And so that's where if a man is completing his goals of like he wants to get this much money so he can get rent, and those 28 days are up, but he's been like really following through on those goals, and that's where he would stay longer, so he would have the opportunity to make the money but not have to pay it. Because that's a big part of the cycle of being homeless is that they make the money, but then they get kicked out of the shelter, and then they have to spend the money. And it looks just like that's how the cycle is kind of is. So that's where I think St. Stephen's does a great job of having that. They can stay longer if they're following through on their goals, but with the end goal of getting out. For sure.
Was there much interest in the conversations with them in raising or exploring theological issues?
Not a whole lot. A little bit with GM. He had, as I said, created that interfaith kind of dialogue with a bunch of different men. And he is Native American, so he kind of brought a different aspect to the table, but we didn't talk a whole lot about that. Yeah.
Just kind of curious about your own like personal journey. Are you interested in like pursuing this further, or what are you doing after your graduation?
Yeah, so in the social work program as a junior, you get placed into an agency, and working with men and homeless men was something I didn't want to do at all. And of course I got placed there, which is ironic, of course. The Lord probably had that all planned out. And I actually loved it. So that's definitely something. I want to go to grad school to be a social worker, so that's definitely a path. Working with homeless men. So we'll see, I guess.
You had mentioned that one of your roles used to be like find out. Is that something like only for staying there for an extended time, or anyone?
Yeah, anyone can use that. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is no question, but a comment. There's something I like about your research is the definition of meeting up, or the meeting up home.
because the one popular assumption is these people don't have home, and that usually will create such stereotype or create the imply they are dangerous, they are not responsible, they all kinds of stereotype. But in your definition, to them, what is the home? Not only include the biological relationship or also include the friends, and they are responsible for their friends, and they are they show loyalty, and they develop a friendship with them. So I really like that, and so I think that is also the value of your research to give us the new understanding of their relationship.
This is just a comment. Well, it's a comment with a question. Because, well, you said 50% of the men that are homeless either drug or alcohol. I think
And that statistic that I said was that they're like adults in their life growing up had an addiction to that.
well, it's the adults in their life.
Yep.
not-
Yep.
But do you by chance know anything about there's a correlation between homelessness and drug and alcohol addiction?
Oh yeah, I think there definitely is a relationship there, but I didn't really look into that a lot. But I mean, there definitely are men at St. Stephen's that struggle with that. But that's the thing. That's everything about St. Stephen's is a sober and dry shelter. So to say at St. Stephen's, you can't be involved with any of that, and if you are, you would kicked out. But there are plenty of shelters in the Twin Cities that aren't. So St. Stephen's is unique in that way of being a sober shelter, which I think kind of contributes to the motivation maybe of most of the men that I see there wanting to get out.
So do they test them on a regular basis?
They do random testings, but yeah, and all the men know that coming in. So.
Did you feel safe when you were there?
Yep, that was my mom's main concern, but I never felt unsafe at all. They have they employ men within the shelter, so men that are there can be like the doorman or the laundry guy or the cook, and so the doorman would always walk me out to my car, and I felt safe always. So. Yeah, I know being a young female working in a men's shelter was kind of a weird thing to explain to people, but. Yeah.
So you said you went in fall 2012 and then this fall again.
Yeah, so
Did you see some of the same guys? Like you said you knew them, or were they all the same people?
for the most part, the guys that I had like good relationships with, like DM and JS, they had moved on, of course. So that was like a bummer for me, but it's like such a good thing that they're not there anymore. You know, it's kind of like that weird thing, like, no, I wanted to see you, and you're not here. But of course you're not here because you moved on and they have apartments and stuff. So
So you kept in contact, or you knew where they were?
yeah. Yeah, they still come around to the shelter to hang out every so often. So.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Lauren. And thank you for attending and supporting Lauren and learning about homelessness. Great.